Meeting will please come to order. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. As I said, this is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. We'll call the matters in the order in which they appear on the printed agenda, and there are copies of the agenda on the table by the door, so you may want to have one so you can follow along to see when your matter will be called. If you plan to address us tonight, we ask you to please come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone and tell us who you are and where you live, as that may be relevant to the matter at hand. We ask you to speak clearly into the microphone so we can hear you, and because everything you say and everything we say is being recorded. And from those recordings, minutes of the meeting are prepared, and these minutes are available both at Village Hall and on our website at wilmette.com. Also, our Village Board meetings are televised on Local Access Channel 6 and on the Internet, so if you look up, you can actually see the cameras. The red dot indicates the active camera. By televising our meetings, we make it easy for our neighbors in the community to follow the proceedings of the Village Board, see the types of matters that come before us, the questions we ask, and the policies we create. You can find archive videos of Village Board and other local government meetings at wilmette.com. I'd like to personally thank all the residents of Wilmette who regularly tune into Channel 6 and follow the workings of their local government. Now, before each meeting, the Board receives a packet of agenda materials. These materials are also posted on wilmette.com on the Friday before our meeting so that interested parties and residents and others can review the very same materials that the Board members receive. This week's packet contained 289 pages. So we've had an opportunity to review all the information in the agenda packet. So if you plan to address us tonight, we ask that you tell us the most relevant, most material, most important things that you'd like us to focus on. Finally, we are a community of neighbors, and as such, we want our meetings to be as civil and courteous as possible. So at this point, would you, as a courtesy to those around you, would you please take time to turn off your cell phones and other devices, which I'm doing right now as well. And while we're turning off our phones, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Wolf?
Here.
Trustee Sullivan?
Here.
Trustee Plunkett? Trustee Dodd?
Here.
Trustee Kurzman?
Here.
Trustee Pierce?
Here.
President Blinsky?
Here. So we have a quorum. Item 2 is the next item on the agenda. That's public comment. During public comment, we ask if there's any member of the audience who would like to address the Board on an item which is not on the agenda. Members of the audience may address the Board on matters which are on tonight's agenda when that particular matter is called. So is there anybody who would like to be heard on a matter which is not on the agenda? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Berlinski and distinguished trustees. My name is Eric Potters, and I just wanted to inform you, I just came from the, planning meeting, a study session for Winnetka. On August 25th, the #1 guide to His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be coming to the Winnetka Community House on Lincoln Avenue, and I wanted to invite the mayor personally to come out, and he can bring a trustee, just one guest. There's going to be probably about 20 dignitaries there. There's going to be a private audience with him as well.
With the Dalai Lama?
With the #1 guide to the Dalai Lama.
Okay. So, okay.
Yeah, I'm from Morton Grove, and we had the Prime Minister of Tibet come through, and then we had the Speaker of the House who ran against him come through. He was now based in Walden, New York, and basically Sakya Trinchen Rinpoche is taking residency in Walden, New York as well, and he'll be traveling to the Mayo Clinic for an MRI, and then be going to Madison, and then from Madison he'll be coming here.
And what's the date again, sir?
I have flyers here to share with you.
Okay, great.
And then I've got my business card as well with my personal email that I could share with your clerk. And like I said, there'll be 200 tickets, so that'll probably sell out. But if you attend, you'll get a private audience with him and what have you.
Great.
So
Thank you very much.
Your clerk is
Right there.
Perfect.
Say hi to Mayor DiMaria for me, would you?
I will.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard on a matter which is not on the agenda? Welcome. Hello, nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you too. Thank you for having a public comment session. Some of you may recognize my name. I'm Shannon Zock. I think I've emailed all of you. So I apologize for my voice. I just returned home from vacation today, and we had a great time, as you can tell from my voice. What I am asking you to do this evening is to consider for future meetings, as I understand that's how this works, to consider revisiting the process of crossing guard selection. The area that I'm most concerned about is the area of Locust Road right in front of WJHS and the McLean Center. There are a number of children that cross there to go to Ramona Elementary School, including my children. And my daughter, Alexandra, last year, in her 4th grade year, was nearly struck by a car because the traffic is rather severe at the hours that the Ramona students have to cross. I was asked to be patient last year when I guess at the end of not this most recent school year, but the prior school year, because these school times were changing, and that was meant to alleviate this difficulty with having such congestion. However, it has only proven to increase the level of congestion at the time at which most of the elementary schoolers have to cross over Locust to head to Ramona Elementary. And I waited very patiently for a year and unfortunately didn't see any improvements, and in fact only saw more distressing situations happen during that year. So this year I went ahead to the Transportation Commission and proposed, would you please consider putting a crossing guard there? I was also met with a please be patient. In 2019, we do intend to do some construction on Locust Road, and we would appreciate your patience again to wait until that happens before we would even consider looking at putting a crossing guard there. To me, that just didn't sit right as a mom of 3 girls and a very active participant within the school systems. Ramona Elementary School has more students than the other 3 elementary schools, yet it has 50% fewer guards. So it has 2 compared to 4 for each of the other schools. More students would cross there if there was a guard there, which would alleviate a lot of the congestion in front of Ramona Road, which I know gets brought forth at those same Transportation Commission meetings. Plus, it's just really good for kids to get out and ride their bikes before school. It's been shown in studies to stimulate brain activity and get them prepared to learn. So I understand that there's a process in place to determine how crossing guards are selected, but I would ask, please, that you consider looking at that and making sure that it really is taking into account the current situation at Ramona and on Locust Road. So I think that there are some more people. I was trying to keep my comments to this so that other people can share other comments about this particular crossing so as not to repeat ourselves. So I know that there are some more people, if you don't mind them coming forward at this time too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you as well.
I'm Brittany Gerster. I live at 2911 Orchard Lane. And while my children have a pretty straight shot to Ramona, once they get to Highcrest and the junior high, then they do have to start crossing Locust, which is very dangerous. And my oldest is a 6th grader, so she's had a few encounters having trouble crossing over Locust this year. I'm here to support the Ramona Needs Crossing Guards Action Committee as well. And I'm just going to talk on the point of there is a crossing guard for summer enrichment, which is housed at Ramona this summer. If there's a need only in the summer, I'm not understanding how it can be any less needed during the school year when we do have such a large number of children in our school. So, if you're employing someone for the summer, there is a need, and it's been identified as a dangerous crossing. It doesn't get any less dangerous when the schools are all in session. The timing really doesn't make that much of a difference, and everyone in this day and age is off in a hurry trying to get to where they need to go in the morning. People are distracted, they're on their phones, and our children shouldn't be suffering, or eventually somebody's going to get injured. So please consider our needs. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Lauren Litchfield. I'm at 2340 Meadow Drive North. Also with kids currently at Ramona. And in addition to the comments that have been made, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my frustration with the status quo. I too was at the Transportation Commission meeting, and was shocked that when the data came through about the number of students using the crossings, that they were ready to just go ahead and reapprove that when there's a crossing guard that only crosses 8 children. There are 7 on my street alone that would use the crossing. So it was shocking, and some of the Transportation Commission members were also shocked that they were getting ready to pass that through and say, yep, same thing, let's do it again next year, no problem, when clearly there's a change. At one point, there may have been more children crossing there, and it was an appropriate place to have a crossing guard. Clearly, there are more children now that would use other crossing areas. We were told that someone had reviewed that crossing and that, in fact, there weren't that many children there. When the truth is, I won't let my child go right now because it's so dangerous. It's a huge liability for the Village of Wilmette. It's a huge liability for all of us. No one wants to see a child get hurt. But I'm just frustrated that we were ready to just rubber stamp it and move on when, in fact, the numbers clearly showed there was a difference, and there is really maybe not a need somewhere else, and there is elsewhere. So that's what I've got. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who?
Hello, good evening.
You may have to lean down.
Yeah,
into
I was
the
going to say that.
microphone.
I don't think they
or
make it
just
tall
speak up.
enough.
Yeah, I don't have that problem, but you, sir, may.
Well, I grew up in the Netherlands. We were all pretty tall there. So, anyways, my name is Bartijn Bouwman. I live at 2436 Cardinal Lane. I too wanted to talk about the crossing guard on Locust. I think we all recognize that obviously we need to have due process and make sure that we're not, putting crossing guards in the wrong places. So we recognize the need for the process. But I think in the meantime, we have about a 2-year delta between where we're fixing Locust and where we are doing a study for the impact that it could have on the children that are crossing there. And for that 2-year period, we're kind of keeping the status quo as it is. And that is our concern, because that 2-year period is a busy period with construction. It's making it really hard for the drivers to pay attention because they'll be distracted by everything that's going on. I know that there's measures that are in place to help that, but we don't think that's enough without a crossing guard there. So we really would like for you to kind of take the leadership and say, okay, we know that there's a process, but in this 2-year period, until everything is fixed on Locust, we need to have this temporary crossing guard in place. Then we can do the study, and if the study then shows that everything is okay and we don't need one, okay, that's it. But if the study then shows that we do need a crossing guard, then we will need to decide to do that as well. What I'm saying is, in the meantime, in those 2 years that we are fixing Locust, we should really have a crossing guard in place for our kids to cross safely over there. That was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Person requesting the crossing guard. My name is Tiffany Myers. I live at 2634 Laurel Lane. I have 2 boys, one going into 5th grade, one going into 3rd grade. I told my younger son, excuse me, that I was coming here tonight to talk about the crossing guard, and he's like, why? Cars have only had to slam on their brakes twice to avoid hitting me. They were able to stop. It was okay. And I'm like, and so it was kind of shocking. I do let my kids walk, but it's not very safe. It's like a Frogger. Any of you who have driven down Locust in the morning, all the cars are lined up for the drop-off at Wilmette Junior High, and the kids have to walk through the cars, kind of lean forward, be able to see if there's something coming the other 2 ways, and then run across. And it's puzzling because all of the other schools have people out in front, including the high school, both at New Trier and at Loyola, but there's no one there to cross the children for what basically amounts to 4 schools at that street and that intersection. And as I understand it, it's $15,000 a year for a crossing guard, and would just love that you would consider revisiting this issue and making it a safe place to cross.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi. I'm Maria Platt, and I live at 2801 Birchwood Avenue, which is right around the corner from all schools. It's a perfect place. And I'm usually drive, if I'm late, if my kids are late to Ramona, I drive down Ramona and then Wilmette Avenue and then up on Locust. And picking them up from Ramona too. So I'm always on Locust when there's a lot of cars there and when there's a lot of children. And I just want to reiterate what everyone else is saying, that, you know, I drive like 2 miles an hour because I see the kids trying to cross Locust around the cars. And I don't, you know, I want to make sure that I'm there to stop, because I've been there crossing and somebody else will stop for me and another car will go around them. And so I just like to go on record saying that I too think that this should be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Sharon Gertz. I live at 2600 Greenleaf Avenue. I have two going to be third grade girls, and I won't let them cross because it is like playing Frogger, human Frogger. I've had trouble crossing there with them. I've had to grab them back from the cars turning into the junior high. They don't look. And then there's an additional lane of the cars going around who don't see the children crossing, so we rarely get to walk to school. A crossing guard should be put there. Just going on record. Thank you.
Thank you. One more? No? Okay. Mr. Frenzer, my understanding is actually that we're not waiting until the construction's done to relook at this. Is that? Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, I'm afraid the engineer and the Public Works Director isn't here tonight. My understanding from them is that the Transportation Commission has asked the staff to gather additional data in August as school's back in session, and they're trying to schedule a meeting after the beginning of the school year. Under the board's ordinance, the Transportation Commission can make the recommendation whenever it thinks it's appropriate pursuant to the guidelines the board has approved to recommend additional or different allocations of crossing guards. And at such time, the staff will, when we can bring that back to the village board, and it's up to the village board. Obviously, the village board has to authorize the expenditure of public funds, but the commission, I think, is going to look at that. They're also are going to be examining during the construction phase, which is mentioned still some significant period of time off, what safety processes are necessary then, and then post-construction, what's appropriate for the site as well. So I don't know that it'll be 2 years. I don't know what the Transportation Commission will do in September, but my understanding from speaking to the engineer is that they're supposed to be gathering additional information once the fall session begins.
Right.
And discussing it again.
So we're still utilizing the process, but it's expedited rather than some of the initial suggestions of waiting till Locust was reconstructed. They're going to try and gather data right at the beginning of the school year to do their work.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
And I'll speak to the director of engineering and the village engineer tomorrow.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What role, if any, does it play that crossing is not on the walking routes that are on the map used by the school district? And can you help me understand that aspect?
I don't know that I'm the best qualified to speak to that. If I regrettably don't have the engineer here tonight. The policy document that has been approved for the Transportation Commission to use does look at many different factors, including traffic, the age of the students crossing, where the school crossing routes are. I'm not sure that that's dispositive one way or the other as to whether or not there should be a crossing guard there. There's many different variables identified in the policy that they're supposed to examine.
Well, I think
so it's not disqualified by virtue of not being on.
I don't think either of us are the transportation safety experts that would answer that question. Does that make sense? I'm not the transportation safety expert that would answer that question. And I don't think you are either.
I would be.
Bridget would be.
Or
Chief
Jan,
Murphy.
or Chief Murphy, but my understanding of it is that's one of the variables that they look at. I don't know that it's necessarily dispositive. Where people go is also an important variable that they look at, too. Times and ages of students, and I don't think the policy, from my recollection of reading it most recently, identifies one factor as necessarily dispositive above all others.
Right.
If that's helpful, and if not, certainly either Dan or Bridget can perhaps shed some more light on it.
Yeah, would you ask?
Chance to,
Would you ask them to circulate a memo to the board responding to Trustee Kurzman's question?
Mhm.
So we sort of have the experts' answer on it.
will do.
Some context for my question is that there are unmet needs in the community. This is one. In looking at the map, it does not cover the full extent of the village, and I know that parents in another neighborhood have expressed that they have been told that if the map doesn't show a route going that way, therefore they shouldn't get a crossing guard. I just would like clarification on that. I think the upside to that crossing at Locust is that it, for all the reasons besides what parents have shared tonight, is it makes full use of the community playfields as a transportation route rather than steering people towards the busy arteries of Wilmette Avenue and Lake Avenue. So I think that would really be building upon one of our best assets for transporting kids to a number of schools, both public and private.
Thank you for sharing your opinion, Trustee Kurzman. Okay. So we're done with item 2. We'll move on to item 3. Please come up to the podium and address us.
Hey team, Alexandra Eidenberg. I live at 504 Illinois Road. I have 4 kids, 2 of which will be starting at Ramona in the fall, and having kindergartners take this longer walk is obviously a concern, and I want them to be safe. I understand that, from what you were just saying, that there is a process and it's getting expedited. What are our next steps? This is something that's really critical to the safety of our children. I am paying a lot in property tax to make sure that my kids have access. This is an equity issue. I didn't know that when I moved to Wilmette that because I lived on the west side that my kids were going to be treated differently than the kids on the east side, and so I didn't understand that part. And so right now kids on the east side are getting more crossing guards than kids on the west side, and this is a very critical juncture. And so I'm very excited that you guys just shared that this is going to be expedited, but when can we expect to have an update, and how do we get those
Meeting
updates?
in September, I believe is what Mr. Frenzer said.
They haven't set the exact date, but the next step, I would think, would be the participation in the Transportation Commission
And then
process.
you noted you were going to be talking to somebody specifically. Is there a way for us to understand that conversation and how it panned out and what the answers were from that?
It's the village engineer. I asked the village engineer to share a memo with the board on the policy issue and the question that Trustee Kurzman asked.
And will that come in the minutes and be a deliverable that everyone in the community can see as well?
It certainly could be.
I can make it part of the next board meeting's agenda materials, and then it would be a matter of public consumption. What we're probably going to be doing is just reciting the standards at the Transportation Commission. There's a policy document. It's on our webpage. I think in some of the many emails that we've sent, that's been identified as to where it is on the webpage under Transportation Commission. And that, in fact, sets out all the standards. So really what I'm going to be trying to get the staff to help answer, I think, for Trustee Kurzman is what does the policy say? And the narrow question, as I understood it, was is school walking route like dispositive in the sense that if it's not on the route, then there's no consideration given, or at least that's more or less my understanding of it, or how the
Correct.
school
That was the
walking route.
narrow question. Having spent some time with it, I'm not clear on how that the policy with those various factors, how that could be addressed if we were to see flaws in it. It is a policy document, but I wasn't clear whether that was ordinance or policy, or if that's one and the same. I have inquired on that, and Mike has tried to assist me with that, but there's some clarity lacking, and so I will be following up on that as well.
Well, I guess I can respond to that directly. I mean, the village board passes the ordinances of the village. The village board has an ordinance on the books that says the Transportation Commission is charged with designating the locations of the village where it's necessary to place crossing guards. And those designations have to be pursuant to in accordance with the guidelines adopted by the village board. So the village board created the Transportation Commission. The village board gave them their direction. The village board is responsible for approving the policies that they use. If the village board feels that they're inadequate, need to be updated, changed, or whatever, the village board has complete authority to make those changes. Ultimately, the Transportation Commission also only makes recommendations. Really, I mean, they designate where they should be, but it's up to the village board to decide, because the village board passes the budget, how many crossing guards we're going to fund. So the simple answer to that is that the village board has all the authority to either maintain the existing policy, change it, maintain the existing practice, change it.
And you guys are also the ones that, and it's my understanding this does cost $15,000 for this additional crossing guard. You guys are also the ones to authorize that financing and would provide the approval for that?
The village board approves it as part of their annual budget. We just build in the staff builds in the number of crossing guards that's authorized when they adopt the budget.
Okay, fantastic. I really appreciate you guys taking a look at this. It means a lot to our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item 3, which is the consent agenda. As described on the printed agenda, items which are routine business that are not normally debated by the village board are placed on the consent agenda. All items beginning with the number 3 are on the consent agenda, and tonight that means starting on page 1 with item 3.1, all the items on page 2, and the first 3 items on page 3. Items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight. If an item is not removed by a member of the audience and is not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and will not be discussed. 2 comments here before we proceed. One is Trustee Kurzman had an amendment to the minutes, which have been distributed. So item 3.1 will include the amendment that Trustee Kurzman proposed for the minutes. And then item 3.2 has been withdrawn by the applicant for tonight, so I will remove that from the consent agenda, and we will vote to table that to the next board meeting as requested. So other than those 2 items, are there any other items that any member of the audience would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, are there any other items that any of the trustees would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Again, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda. Includes item 3.1 as amended, and item 3.2 has been removed.
Trustee Wolf.
Aye.
Trustee Sullivan.
Aye.
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce.
Aye.
President Blinsky.
Aye. So the motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. If you are here for an item on the consent agenda, it was just approved, and I'll clarify for people who are here tonight. Again, all the items beginning with 3 have been approved, and that includes item 3.3 and item 3.4 on the Land Use Committee report, and also items 3.12 and 3.13 on the Judiciary Committee's report. So if you're here for one of those items, it's been approved. There'll be no further discussion of those items or any of the other items on the consent agenda, so you are free to leave. Of course, more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Now, the people that just left, I didn't get a chance to tell them, but if you're leaving, be sure and stop by one of our restaurants before heading home, okay? It is early. Next item on the agenda is item 4, report of officers. So we'll start with a report from our village manager, Mr. Frenzer.
No report, Mr. President.
Next report is from our Corporation Counsel, Mr. Stein.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Item 5 is the report of the Liquor Control Commissioner, and there's no report tonight. So we'll move on to the standing committee reports. First up is land use with Trustee Pierce.
All items were handled on the consent agenda.
But we've got, so should I ask Trustee Pierce for a motion on item 3.2?
Yes.
Okay, so
Oh,
Trustee
you
Pierce,
mean
can I get a
the-
motion? Yeah.
Okay.
Can I get a motion to table item 3.2
Okay.
to the July
24th.
Aside
24th
from item
meeting?
3.2.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a last minute switch, you know. So, Trustee Pierce, can I have a motion to table item 3.2 until the July 24th board meeting?
I move that item 3.2 be tabled until the, which meeting?
July 24th.
July 24th.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, so motion carries. Item 3.2 has been tabled until the next village board meeting. Now, Trustee Pierce, everything else has been covered.
Everything
on
else was
consent.
on consent agenda.
Okay, Trustee Sullivan, Finance Committee.
We have one item this evening. It's item 6.21, and it's a discussion presentation on the Wilmette Business Development Program.
So, Mr. Severson, are you going to make the presentation? Welcome. We don't get to see you as often at village board meetings as we do Mr. Adler, so.
Yes, again, I'm Lucas Severson, the Business Development Coordinator for the village. And this is really a presentation and follow-up to a presentation I gave the Finance Committee a little earlier. So if you're on the Finance Committee, sorry, I apologize. It's going to be kind of the same. But just for the ease of the presentation, I'm going to categorize our efforts into 5 different categories. Economic development being the first. That's really just attracting new businesses. Business retention, which is keeping the existing businesses we have. Business assistance, which is making it as easy as possible for businesses to operate in Wilmette. Regulatory improvements, which would be a lot of the things that come before the village board through the land use committee. And marketing. For economic development, I think a lot of people commonly associate this with calling businesses, getting businesses attracted to come to your community. That's certainly part of it, but it's really a lot more than that. It's about building relationships with businesses. I might be contacted by a business or contact a business, and a particular site that they're looking for might not be available at this time. But in keeping that contact with them over months, years, hopefully an opportunity does become available, and I can contact them and hopefully invite them to the community.
And your memo said that we actually keep a database of the contacts that we get. So 5 years ago, who was it that called me about that corner, and now that it's open, you can actually go back and look and find who it was.
It's actually a great resource to have. So yeah, every kind of conversation I have with a business, talk to them about kind of what they're looking for, where they want to be, the size of the space, and from that I can get a better sense of maybe when certain opportunities become available, I know who to contact. Other things we do, in addition to talking to potential businesses, would be talking to our existing commercial property owners, developers, and that's really to try and attract development to the community. So if we know a particular property might become available in the next year or two, we'll work with that property owner as well as potential developers that we identify that might be suited well for that site. In addition to that, we also work with the broker community, so the commercial real estate brokerage community. And that's important because for especially a lot of the, I'll call it national, regional businesses will tend to hire commercial brokers to find their spaces for them. And while we don't have a lot of national tenants, those national tenants that are seeking locations that want to be on the North Shore, it's important to have that relationship with those brokers. That way, Wilmette's at the top of the list when they're looking for sites. Because we have so many independent businesses in Wilmette, it's also important to have information readily available to those businesses. So if they're looking on the North Shore or looking in the area, they say, hey, I want this type of space. That's available. It's actually available on the village website at any time. So a lot of the calls actually I get are from people who went on the website, saw the listing, and are following up, asking me more questions about that particular property. And just sort of backtracking, talking about developers and, seeking out, talking to commercial property owners. By the Village Center Master Plan, identified several key redevelopment sites. And so those sites in particular we keep a close watch on so that keeping in contact with the property owners so that when something does become available, we can act on it quickly. Also talking about business retention, and this is arguably more important than business attraction, is really keeping the great businesses we have in the community. I feel that's arguably more important. And the way we do that is building relationships with the business community. So I attend all the Chamber of Commerce board meetings and work directly with the Chamber of Commerce and the business community in general. So I tend to hear more about maybe if a business might be struggling, might need something that allows the village to be a little more proactive and maybe helping provide assistance to that business. So hopefully it doesn't close or move out of the community. In terms of business assistance, this is really, I would consider the most important part of my job on a day-to-day basis is really just providing assistance to businesses. I'm really the single point of contact for most of the business community. So, over the years, I think most people in the village have known if they get the finance department might get a phone call from a business, they'll know to direct it directly to me. That way I can work directly with that business. And just really keeping keeping in contact with the business community. One of the things that we have in Wilmette are, like I said, a lot of independent businesses, and most of these businesses, this might be their first or second business that they're opening. So it's really important to have a resource at the village to sort of guide them through the approval process, get them connected to the community, to work with the Chamber of Commerce and other businesses to help support their growing business. Other things that we do as a village, a lot of this comes through the board, is regulatory improvements. So making it as easy as possible for businesses to do business, to operate. Things we've done, make it easier to have outdoor seating, making it easier for restaurants to open. Those are all things that come through the village board and are made.
Liquor licenses.
Liquor licenses. There you go. And lastly, just marketing. Like I said earlier, the village works closely with the Chamber of Commerce. This is especially helpful on our marketing projects because we really work in tandem. So we're not doubling resources. We're really combining resources and having one message for the community. One of the things that we've been working on is a new campaign, which hopefully we'll be able to announce in the upcoming weeks. No timetable set on that, and one of the great benefits that we've had in working with the Chamber of Commerce on this joint marketing program is they've been able to contact residents who live in the community who are marketing experts. We've really been able to get them to volunteer their time on this project. So we got some executive level ad execs to help us in the project. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about the town that you've got so many people that are willing to volunteer their time, whether it's on a board or commission or on a special project like this. So, any questions for Mr. Severson? Obviously, the board members saw the 5 or 6 page memo that he put in that was in the agenda materials tonight.
I mean, as Mr. Severson said, this was a good discussion between himself, Mr. Brayman, and Ms. Malloy, who brought this to us in the Finance Committee, is starting the discussion of what are we doing, knowing that some of we're losing Carsons, and how do we continue to attract businesses here and a thriving environment, which we've done, and I think it's a good compliment to everybody as we've talked about. But where do we go? So this was, I think, an initial discussion of some ideas of how do we continue this momentum.
Well, just a couple of clarifications on the memo. One of the comments in the memo around business development was, we haven't had to use financial incentives except for the hotel tax, but the hotel tax was not a tax on Wilmette residents. It was a new tax that the hotel developer was getting a piece of, but the village was also getting a piece of. So in some sense, that's not really a financial incentive in that we levied a tax that we then collect for ourselves and give some of it back to the developer. That's not the same as a TIF or contributing land or something like that. So I wanted to point that out. And the other
that's capped at 10 years too, or 3.2 million.
Well, until they come back to us and ask for it to start again. The other thing, and it's highlighted in here, but I think it's really important, the fact that when a new business calls you and says, hey, we're looking at this site, our courtesy inspections are a big deal. Without them having a lease signed, we'll work with them to identify what has to be done to a site so there aren't surprises. So we don't have someone sign a lease and say, oh, I don't have the money to do all these improvements, so you're back to square one with them. And I will say that over the past several years, as we've had new restaurants come to town, one of the things that a number of those restaurateurs have said to me personally, something along the lines of, look, I've operated in lots of different towns over my career, and I got to tell you, I've never had as good an experience with a local government as I did with Wilmette when I was getting my business open, which is obviously the kind of thing that the village president and the board members want to hear from businesses, that the staff is being supportive. And as we sort of joke, other communities want you to come here so they can, mess with you for 6 months while you try and get your business open, and that's not how we operate here in Wilmette, which is great. So, Trustee Dodd?
Actually, I have a few questions.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Okay, the first question was on the 611 Green Bay property.
Yes.
So can you tell us what the, how much of the space is rented and how much is vacant?
Of the, of the residential component, I can't speak to that. For the commercial component, of the roughly 6,000 square feet, none of the space has been rented yet.
And so have we had any discussions with the developer about the rental, because part of that property was bringing people into the community. That property now has been up for a year, and so I just wonder, I think, do we know? And
our last discussion, we do.
Do we have any flexibility to kind of get to a point where we're going to ask them to start to lower the rents to get the people to come in? And do we have anything?
The last time we talked to them, they were pretty close to 60% leased, and that was probably about a month and a half ago.
Really,
that's on the residential side.
On the residential side,
that surprises me, because when I go down, when I look at that property, I'm just saying, like at night, looks.
Right. It was around high 40s, 50% occupied, and around 60% leased. Mean lease signs, people to move in.
Got it. Yep.
We sort of judge, the success of that project on what that developer, if that developer would want to do it again in Wilmette, and we know they want to do it again, meaning they would love to find other property to build in Wilmette, which makes us feel good about it, at least where they believe they are in their rentals right now. As I think you may know, the rates that they're charging are fairly high, and to fill the building, I believe they have been making rent concessions and maybe a month free and doing other things to fill those units. So the per square foot rates you calculate when you look at the square footage and the amount it's costing isn't necessarily the rate in which somebody's paying, because they are doing, I've seen it for 1 bedrooms. I know all the 3 bedrooms leased up really quickly. I think within 45 days to 60 days, they were leased up on the 3 bedrooms. Now they don't have a lot of 3 bedrooms. So I would say they're looking at that themselves. I don't, at this point, think it's necessary for us to get involved to tell them what they need to do to fill the building. I think they're interested in doing that. And again, we've seen it, at least on the 1 bedrooms, because I signed up for the mailing list to follow along, and I know they're giving a month free. And I think they're they're doing their best to get the building filled with, keeping their rent structure, fairly fair across the board.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other question I had was on the marketing campaign, and I just wondered, so have there been any discussions about, as part of this new marketing campaign, to do something to help people understand places to park? Because I do think, I hear a lot about, sometimes people feel like it's difficult to find a place to park, and I think there are places people can park that they might not know about, like on the weekends, they can park in this village hall after, as an example. We park there a lot now because I know about it, and there's usually not very many people there. And then I just want, and in addition, if there's been any discussion around doing like a frequent buyer card, or I guess I'm just looking for ways for us to encourage, to kind of build on the momentum where we're going to do this great marketing campaign, which is going to encourage shop local, and then what are other things we can do to reinforce that. And that's what I was thinking about. I don't know if we like the idea of a frequent buyer card, but
It's been discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I just
definitely
didn't
been
see it in here,
discussed,
so
and
I apologize, I just didn't see it in here.
No, it wasn't in there, but the issue is who's going to be the bank on
The
it.
chamber.
The chamber, exactly, and that's therein lies the challenge, because they're not really staffed to administer a program like that. So then you'd have to outsource it, and that means you got to pay for it. So there has been discussions around it. I don't know what the latest discussion, Lucas, you may know if it's been talked about recently.
Yeah, I don't. It probably gets brought up, every year or two about, and different vendors, different companies have different ways in which you can have a frequent buyer program. I know we were in talks with Spring. I don't know if that's an app you're familiar with, but essentially that's sort of its own frequent buyer program, and they were at a time wanting to work with communities, but that never really panned out.
Some of the individual businesses use either Spring or Belly. Nick's uses Spring. We've had these discussions with the chamber on and off for quite a number of years now. There were some attempts at it in the past, and I think what the chamber's leaned toward more recently is more holiday promotions or special promotions, try to just drive event-type foot traffic downtown, such as a business open house or wine walk. Yes, the sip and shop type events, and they've been very supportive of the village. It wasn't meant to be, obviously it's public entertainment, but the concerts that we've started having was to drive business to the restaurants on what's traditionally a slow night in the middle of the week. So I think their pattern has been to move more toward event or special event type things to generate interest and in the experience.
Yeah, and the parking.
The reason why I think I think that's great. The reason why I was suggesting something like a frequent buyer card is just in my discussions with many residents and businesses during this recent minimum wage discussion, I had an opportunity to talk to lots of different people. And I think that some residents might feel, if they go and visit a business, during one of these sip and shares or whatever, that they are obviously doing a great job supporting the businesses, but it does take frequent going there multiple times within a year or whatever, and that's why I was suggesting it.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with sort of like a community-wide card is, okay, so I've spent all my money at Nick's, at the bar to get my points up, and then I walk over to Lambrick's and buy jewelry with my points, and how do they get, when it's not an individual business offering a discount to its own customer, how does the appropriate economic transfer take place? That's one of the stumbling blocks in terms of a village-wide card. So the other, on parking, it's interesting you bring that up, because I brought that up, 5 years ago, and we do have actually on the website now, don't we have a parking map for downtown? And we revamped some of the signs. The Village Hall signs, I think, could still use some work, but like the signs in the Metro lot are very clear if you park there during the work week, when you can park free in that lot and the like. So.
And if I can add to the parking discussion, we're in the process of communicating with restaurants about the changes the Village Board approved a couple meetings ago, where we changed the time restrictions in an effort to allow employees to park off-street underneath in the Burmeister lot or in the Metro lot to free up spaces for customers. That was a suggestion that came from a restaurateur that went to staff and had village board approval. So we're going to be communicating that. And we've also talked internally about trying to find ways to work with the restaurants downtown to hand out some type of card or information sheet with their checks or something like that, where they can communicate to their customers about parking. So we're definitely working on that and trying to make the perception of the parking problem better.
Yeah.
Normally when someone complains about parking, it's sort of a joke, and they usually say, "There's no place to park in downtown Wilmette. Isn't that great?" You know, that's usually when I get the parking complaint. It's associated with, "Isn't it great that we're so crowded that you actually have to, park in the Metro lot or look for parking?" So.
I have a parking comment too. I think compared to like Evanston, where you either have to find the little machine and put your space number in, and it's not a lot, but you have to pay something. People really do like in Wilmette that you can just park for free and that you can park nearby. But I agree. I think there are places to park that people just aren't aware of.
Mm-hmm. The Hall lot is the best example because the sign suggests that you can only park there during Village Hall hours.
Yes, that's my
free
right.
parking otherwise,
Right.
or open parking otherwise.
And the other one that I think people maybe don't know about is the parking behind the shops, like where Lad and Lassie.
On the alley, behind Central.
Yeah, because it's right there, and I think a lot of times people just aren't aware of it. So hopefully with all these efforts, we can increase awareness. I think the signage does help. I think some of the signs in the downtown area are nice looking and clear.
And that one is
step in the right
signed, isn't
direction.
it? There's arrow signs to it, but I agree. I mean, I park there all the time because usually there's spots.
Yeah.
In the evening, we do get more utilization in the Village Hall lot, more than you might imagine. If you're staying here working late, you actually do see people parking in the lot here to use for the restaurants. It's a little bit harder during the day. The Metro lot, I think we did a better job of signing that as to make it clear that it's free after 3 p.m. Though still it's a challenge for us to get people to the Burmeister lot because it's underground. Some people prefer not to use that, but it's actually very convenient. It has a pedestrian exit right to Wilmette Avenue. One of the things we'll be looking at as we explore with the Central Avenue project, the streetscape grant that we have, signage is certainly is going to be included in that study, and that'll extend to essentially a block either side of Central. So it'll cover Wilmette Avenue and Central, and hopefully as part of a new pedestrian environment, we'll have signage, some signage improvements too.
Other questions? Trustee Kurzman?
Thank you. I'm curious about the neighborhood retail business districts, and can you paint a picture for the occupancy rate in those buildings? Similar to what Trustee Dodd mentioned about, working into our previous meeting, we heard a lot about vacancies, fear of more vacancies. I'm curious what the current rate is and how it holds historically. I guess I'm curious about all commercial space, but I'm particularly interested about the neighborhood retail business districts. I mean, if that requires follow-up, that's fine, but I'm curious if you could just characterize it.
Yeah, we traditionally don't look at vacancy rates for individual districts, but I can say right now for the commercial retail spaces as a village as a whole, it's right below 6%, and since 2015, the average vacancy rate has been 5.72%. With a high of 4.9 and low of 4.9 and a high of 6.6. So
since what was the time period on that?
2015.
15. Okay, so last few years.
And even going back to like 2010, it's pretty steady between 5.5. It would averages around 5.7%, and that's been pretty steady. It was a little bit high at the beginning of this year, but it's since gone back down. I know. I think a lot of people ask questions about 4th and Linden. There was the vacancy that happened when the hardware store law left. Fortunately, we did have a business owner who was a dentist in Winnetka who purchased the property and then subdivided the space. He's occupying one half of it, and he actually just got an office tenant that leased. So that space is now occupied. You know, some of the spaces on the north side of Linden in that area, those spaces tend to be a little more difficult to rent. And just from anecdotally, what I've heard from businesses is that the lease terms aren't great. So I think that's somewhat of a reason why some of those vacancies are a little bit longer. I know on Ridge Road, some of the vacancies that we have are in the building, which was recently purchased by Artis, and that's going to be going through a redevelopment. So really no one's going into those spaces. And across the street, there's a vacancy where there's a Pilates studio that left probably a couple months ago. I would say over the course of history, it's not really any higher or lower currently than it has.
So in our most difficult economic times, it is consistent in that range, or like how bad has it gotten?
For the vacancy, for the vacancy rate, I mean, since 2015, it was.
I guess I'm thinking with the 2008 dip and other recessions, whether we've seen larger fluctuations in what you're describing in the last 8 years.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Just anecdotally, I think I noticed a drop off. I would say beginning of 2017, and just the number of businesses that I was getting calls from. I would say that's slowly increased. Past couple months, it seems to be a little bit busier. I don't know if it's because of the summer or what, but you know, all in all, it's really not. There's really not a lot of peaks and valleys.
And
okay, no,
Lucas,
but that's helpful.
I can add, I pulled up our 2012 budget where we've tracked performance measures, and the vacancy rate in 2010 was 4.9%, in 2011 was 4.9%. So kind of within that range Lucas was talking about, even during the depths of the recession there.
Thank you. Well, yeah, may I ask one more before? Yeah, thank you. So I think we'll have broader discussions on this, but I'm curious I'm just too curious not to ask. Do you have an opinion as to whether we have too many neighborhood retail business districts right now for where retail is going, or what you see as our ability to, fully have a vibrant, economic neighborhood there? Or do we have too much capacity, or do you think we can continue to fill these vacancies and have vibrant neighborhood retail business districts?
That's a good question. I think it's we'll have to see. I think traditionally, at least the way the zoning ordinance is crafted, the neighborhood retail districts are allowed to accommodate more personal services and offices than you would see, let's say, in our village center downtown, or in some of our commercial shopping centers. So by design, they've traditionally had more service businesses and offices. I don't see there being more retail businesses wanting to locate in those districts necessarily, just because of if there's an availability in our downtown where you have higher traffic volumes, most likely those retail tenants are going to want to go where you have people walking. But it's going to be challenging.
Well, thanks for taking the questions.
Trustee Dodd?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Trustee Kurzman's question, because I thought it was really, really good. Which was you talked about vacancy rates, and you might not have this, but available to you now, but I'd be interested in looking at, storefront vacancy rates, so I think when you look at vacancies across all the different businesses, that's, but I would be interested in seeing a trend of storefront vacancy rates in the retail, in the various residential retail business as well as the downtown area, because I think that's would just be an interesting trend to see if that's maybe different than the steadiness of the overall vacancy rates, because small businesses are going into some of the second floors or multi
Right.
office space.
And to your point, if you had, if you're including office and the like,
Right.
you could have a base that's so big that 20 storefronts close in a
That's
month,
exactly
and
my
it moves
question.
the percentage by 2/10 or
Yes,
something.
that's exactly what my question is
It's a
getting
great
at.
question.
And I think it's something we should look at, and it's really building on your question. Thank you.
Yeah, we could start tracking that.
One other comment just for the board. I don't know if people saw the Tribune's afternoon email blast. The Fresh Market announced that they were closing a number of stores in Illinois, but I'm happy to report that of the 4 that are surviving, Wilmette was on the list. So we survived that round, but the Fresh Market is not not in expansion mode anymore, and clearly, had announced some retail closings in Illinois, but Wilmette was not on the list. So, any other questions? Thank you very much. Very helpful. Back to Trustee Sullivan.
Our other 2 items were approved on consent.
Administration Committee, Trustee Dodd.
All items on consent.
Municipal Services Committee, Trustee Wolf.
One item covered on consent.
Public Safety, Trustee Kurzman.
No report.
There were 2 items on the Judiciary Committee's consent agenda. There are no reports from our special committees. Item 7 is new business. There's no additional new business to discuss. Item 8, pending matters referred to standing committees. No actions to take there tonight. So we'll move on to item 9, which is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? We stand adjourned. 8:33 p.m.